What's going on, guys? Super Insane 18 here on this beautiful, glorious day, and what makes this day so absolutely fantastic is after 4 long, excruciating years in prison for crimes he did not commit, we finally have Orcust Harp Horror back on the menu. So today we are going to be showing you an Orcust deck profile, specifically Orcust Bystial Horus. Some people have been calling it HBO for Horus Bystial Orcust, but we're going to go ahead and show you guys the build, and we do have some other Orcust builds as well, such as a runic deck build, so if you guys want to see that, make sure to let me know by liking and commenting down below. Let's go ahead and jump on in. As stated in the intro, this is obviously an Orcust deck profile, so we of course have the man, the myth, the legend himself, Orcust Harp Horror, finally back from the ban list, limited to 1, and honestly, it just feels great because not only do we have Harp Horror, but unless you play Master Duel, specifically talking about the TCG, for the first time ever, we have Girsu and Harp legal at the same time. For those of you that don't know, Girsu actually came out in the TCG after Harp Horror was banned, so we never actually got to play with this card. We were playing a ton of different ways to send the Harp Horror in previous builds, such as Mathematician, Armageddon Knight, Dark Grepher, so on and so forth, but this is an in-engine way of doing it, but not just that, it is also a 1-card Galatea, because if it is the only monster you control, you are able to summon a token, and as long as you link that token off into something like a Linkuriboh, because it is a level 1, then you will be able to make a Galatea off of just the 1 monster, while also being able to Foolish Burial any of your Orcust names. Not just that, it does have an additional effect of if there are 2 or more cards in its column, it becomes a tuner, which is actually relatively important because you are able to actually get that effect off by putting something in the extra monster zone and a continuous or a set spell trap underneath it, and then when you summon it, it will be the tuner that you need to go into some of the things in the extra deck, which we will talk about later. Now we have our 2 copies of our Orcust Nightmare. This is a card that you might want to run at 3, but honestly, it's just a little bit bricky if you do. The only real reason to run it at 3 is if you are not playing the Bystial stuff, and I'll talk about that when we get to the card, which is important for that reasoning. We have our 2 copies of Skeleton. This is just the recursion as well as a way to put up an additional interruption. If you have the field spell, you are able to banish this as a quick effect to reborn a monster. You're going to reborn something like Dingirsu for a non-target send, and it just adds a little bit extra to your end board. And of course, our 1 copy of the World Wand. This is just for additional extension as well. Now, you might notice that I'm not playing the Brass Bombard. I don't think that it's that necessary. There aren't really that many Orcust monsters that you're going to want to summon from your hand, especially because we are playing the Horus engine, meaning that we'll always be able to discard them off of something like the King's Sarcophagus, which, speaking of, we of course have our 3 copies of Imseti. This is not only a good way to search the King's Sarcophagus, but it even replaces the discard by giving you an additional draw. We have our 1 copy of Happy. This is the best one aside from Imseti for this deck, because it allows you to gain recursion if something leaves your field by your opponent. So you can add back any of your banished Orcus or any of your graveyard cards, anything that you really need. And I'm actually opting to play 1 final Horus monster in the Dumatef. This is mostly just because I want an additional extender. If there is a card that you want to cut for something else, this is probably number 1 on that list, because realistically you don't need it. You only really need the 2 names because they're level 8s, but because we are also playing the Gizmek later on, which you guys will see, I wanted an additional 8 as an extender, not only to give us the possibility of another rank 8, but also just allowing us to push for additional damage and maybe link climb a little bit harder. We are onto the Bystial engine, and unfortunately I don't actually have the 3 Lubellion, so we're going to go ahead and have to pretend that this is in fact a Lubellion, but we do want to play 3 because being able to search it is very important, but not just that, we want to be able to even summon this from the graveyard using its effect by sending one of our Bystials, because that will let us get a card like Branded Regained, which you'll see later on in the profile. Branded Regained will allow us to put back our Orcusts anytime we banish them for effect, and get a draw as well, kind of adding not only a bit of recursion into the deck, but some resource advantage as well. We are on just 1 Magnamut, 1 Druisworm, and 1 Saronir. You don't really need all that much for the Bystial engine, you just need to play the minimal amount necessary because you don't really want to banish too many of your own cards, and we're not really in a dark heavy format, so they're really just here for additional extension as well as some synchro plays, which you will see in the extra deck. We are still on the Armageddon Knight and the Dark Grepher. These are just additional normal summons and ways to send your Harp to the graveyard. If you don't open something like the Girsu, having 5 copies is better than having 3. We are on the 1 copy of the Gizmek Orochi. Like I said, this is not only a level 8, but also an additional extender and a Dark Machine, meaning that it fits in with the theme for some of the cards that are important revolving around Dark Machines. We are on 3 copies of Ash Blossom as our final monster. This is just the most generic hand trap. You guys might remember from a few months ago that I made a video that Ash really wasn't good, and I kinda still stand by that mentality, because Ash in and of itself, yeah, you can stop almost any deck, but it's not going to actually stop it. It's going to maybe hinder them a little bit, but a lot of times if Ash is the only thing you're relying on, it's just not enough, so you usually have to pair it with additional hand traps. But I just think that because it's the most generic, if you only have room for one, it's still probably the one that you're going to end up playing. Onto the spells, we have our 3 copies of King Sarcophagus. Not only does this allow us to discard cards from our hand to then Foolish Burial Horus names, but while it's on the field we can special those Horus names from our graveyard, allowing us to get into very important monsters that you'll see in the extra deck. We are on 2 copies of Orchestrated Return. This is just pretty consistent draw power for the deck, being able to either discard your Orcust monsters or even send them from field if you need to, and it is technically searchable, but rather settable, off of something like Galatea, which we'll talk about when we get to Galatea. We do have our 1 copy of Orchestrated Babel. This is a very interesting card, and if this deck picks up in play, you might actually consider making this more than 1, for the fact of it making your Orcust monsters quick effects, because if this deck picks up steam, more people are going to be playing cards like DD Crow and Bystials, which obviously put a hindrance on your strategy, but if they're quick effects, then they target it with the DD Crow or the Bystial, and then what are you going to do? You're going to chain it, you're going to banish it, they're not going to get their advantage, you're going to get yours, so that is something that might want to be considered if this picks up steam, but for now it's just fine at 1. We have our 1 copy of Branded Regained. Like I said, this allows you to put back your Orcusts when you banish them and then draw a card for additional advantage. And then we have our 1 copy of Foolish Burial. Obviously we want to be able to send cards to our graveyard, and our 1 copy of Reinforcement of the Army to search the Dark Grepher and the Armageddon Knight, because again, those are essentially pseudo Girsus in the ability to send something like Horp Horror to the grave. Onto the traps, we have our 1 copy of Orchestrated Crescendo. Not only is this an Omni Negate, but it banishes it as well, and in the graveyard you are able to banish it to add a Dark Machine, which will then, to add a Dark Machine, you will then become locked, but you're able to continue playing, so it's really, really strong. We have our 1 copy of Branded Beast. This is another cuttable card because you're usually going to go for the Regained over the Branded Beast, but I had 1 extra spot in the deck, so this felt like a relatively good thing to throw in there. And we have our 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, making the main deck 40 cards. Let's get on to the extra. What if I told you that you can get free money while also simultaneously supporting the channel? Using Whatnot, a live streaming auction site that I have recently partnered with, if you sign up with my link in the description down below, you get $15 off your first purchase. They are looking to expand their TCG and more specifically their Yu-Gi-Oh side of their website, so go ahead and check them out. Maybe you don't even use that $15 for Yu-Gi-Oh, you can use it for anything on their website. Just go ahead, check them out, you'll be supporting the channel, and obviously you get some free money. It would not be an Orcust deck without the one and only Galatea, the Orcust Automaton. Not only does it allow you to recur resources by shuffling back your banished Orcusts, but it even gives you advantage by setting an Orcust spell or trap from your deck, meaning you have instant access to your Babel, your Crescendo, your Return, any of those 3 for whatever the situation might call. And not just that, because it is an Orcust Link monster, when we get to it in the extra deck, you'll see the Dingirsu can just overlay on top of it. So yeah, really, really strong. We have our 1 copy of Linkuriboh. This card is a mandatory card because, like I mentioned, the token off of Girsu is a level 1, meaning that you can summon it, go into the Linkuriboh because Galatea does require 2 effect monsters, and then that turns Girsu into a 1-card Galatea and access to your Harp. We have our 1 copy of Barricade Board Blocker. This card is there for the really niche hands where maybe you opened a little bit too many Orcust names, but you have ways to put 2 monsters on board. This is a free discard outlet to get that out of your hand rather, and be able to just kind of get your ball rolling. We have our 1 copy of Dark. This is a bit of a flex spot. We are locked into Darks a lot of the time after we use any of our Orcust effects, so this is just kind of there to be a link 2 that we can go into, but also allow us to link climb a little bit higher if we are up against another deck that utilizes Darks. This card is definitely cuttable, and if you feel like you have something better, definitely feel free to put it in this place. This is absolutely the flex spot. We have our IP Masquerena and our SP Little Knight. These are pretty much what you're going to end the end board on, is going to be the Masquerena in combination with some other things, and that's going to get you access into your Little Knight. And then we have the Borrelsword Dragon. I'm going to give a shout outs to Cards and Coffee TCG. He pretty much said that this is the best OTK potential. He wasn't playing the Bystial stuff, so I have a little bit more OTK potential than he does, but I still think that Borrelsword is an incredible card for this deck. Not only is it a dark and you're locked into darks, but it's better than Access Code for the sake of all of your link monsters are dark, so Access Code will really only be able to pop 1. This just kind of lets you swing for a absolutely absurd amount of damage. We have our 2 copies of Dingirsu. This card is incredible. It can recur your resources, it can get rid of your opponents. One of my favorite cards in the game. I don't really think much else needs to be said about him. We have our Zombie Vampire. This is part of the reason that the Horus engine is so strong, because you are able to make Zombie Vampire and mill 4, which can get your ball rolling. Not just that, it can even special summon one of the cards that was milled, either from your stack or your opponent's. So if you mill something like an Armageddon Knight, a Dark Grepher, a Girsu, you can go ahead and special summon it. Then you have the effect of those on summon, and you just gain a ridiculous amount of advantage off of it. We have our 1 copy of the Photon Lord. This is just a monster negate. If you don't need the mills, you can go ahead and put up an early monster negate, meaning that you're safe from something like Nibiru or other hand traps, and then you'll have an additional negate on your end board as well. We have our 1 copy of Typhon. This is just a good play card. It's easy to break boards with, so kind of really just have to play it. Plus, again, you're locked into darks. This is a dark. And to finish things off, to complement the Bystial package, we have our 1 copy of Baron de Fleur and our 1 copy of Bystial Dissipator. This is just because you are able to make them off of the Girsu, since it can become a tuner, and there are some end boards that actually utilize them. And there you guys have it. That is going to be my Orcust Bystial Horus deck profile. I would show you guys some combos, but unfortunately, this isn't really a deck that is easy to just show combos with. It's more dependent on what you have, what you mill. There really isn't many 1-card combos. Maybe if you guys want a test hand video, I can go ahead and do that as well. That is something you'll have to let me know in the comment section down below. If you guys enjoyed it, you know the deal. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like, comment, share with your friends, and do not forget to check out the channel sponsor Dueling Guard. Using code INSANE18, you can get 5% off your entire order. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.